What would Claude say?
All right, we should be live. Good morning, model citizens and fans of Back on Track. Welcome to Sidetrack Sunday. It's not Sunday. Trackside.
Trackside.
Good morning. Good morning. Here we go. And fans of Back on Track. So Sidetrack Sunday.
We're off to a good
and
start.
Of course, I'm also not muted. All right, so we have Heath with us here today from ity Junction. Am I pronouncing that right, Heath?
That's how I pronounce it. I think that's a good pronunciation that we should go with.
So we have Heath with us here today from ity Junction.
Can you your name, Heath? Why? How that works out with human city junction? How does that work?
So there are actually two origin of my channel videos out there because I made one that was terrible and then made another one that was terrible. But essentially the way it goes, I was working for an architectural lighting design firm, and there was a contest that New York City was putting on to redevelop the South Street Seaport area. And myself and two other friends of mine put together this concept of basically having these kind of human-shaped kiosks that would be digital kiosks, but they would sort of be human representations. So the idea is that we were trying to put some, humanity into the city by kind of improving the graphical user interface to a digital type of like wayfinding system. So it came out of that. And when I was going to start the YouTube channel, I just kind of thought, oh, that'd be fun. Like, I'm in New York City. It's kind of a city thing, but I want this to be about the people, and just sort of took off from there.
Wow. Okay.
Very interesting. So what were the kiosks for?
Well, so it ended up not happening at all, but the idea was that the kiosks would be interactive kiosks strictly for wayfinding. So somebody would get off the subway and say, which direction's the water? And this, kiosk would be like, over there kind of thing. So it was, this was years ago. So it was before any of this AI stuff.
And then you just carried the graphics from that into your own model railroad channel?
The graphics didn't tie in at all. The graphic was actually designed by a friend of mine. We were talking about kind of what we wanted to do, and the idea of the graphic, for anybody that hasn't figured it out, is and I can back up a little so maybe you can see it, but the letters up here spell out UMAN, and then it's a big H. So the H is kind of the bed, or the frame within the humans that then make up the city.
Very cool.
So the logo is 100% for the channel. We never got far enough to actually develop any graphics or content or anything. It was only in the idea phase.
So the human idea transferred into the model railroad just because it was already there, pre-existing, more or less?
Yeah, I came up with the channel name in March of 2020, about 2 weeks after I was laid off due to a certain world event that happened. And
a showstopper.
Yeah, and I was trying to come up with a way to learn about this sort of transition into online human interaction, and how was it going to work, and how were we still going to be able to relate with people on a real genuine human level when everything is now through a two-dimensional screen. So it was kind of like starting to think about that sort of thing, and how could I be a part of it, and how could I build a community, and how can I keep that human connection with people during this time that we were all ended up, isolated at home.
Well,
a lot of us did.
That's a good lead into my next question, and that's.
I did that on purpose. I knew where you were going, so I
exactly.
Yeah.
So the the number one question that everybody gets asked on every one of these shows is, of course, what got you into model railroading? So what got you started into model railroading, and how did that evolve into the Human City Junction? How did it evolve from where you initially began to where you're at now?
Yeah, so I don't completely know the whole story because I just don't remember it, but I have a picture of myself at 1 year old with a birthday cake with a train on it. And I do remember when I was in like kindergarten or so that my dad had a Lionel 3-rail layout in the basement. When we moved to the home that I like primarily grew up in, we ended up with half of the basement being filled with trains. I had HO scale on one side. My dad had Lionel and LGB stuff on the other side. It was kind of one of those things that always just seemed to be there. And I mean, I went to a lot of Greenberg train shows as a kid. I've got a bunch of Atherton Blue Box stuff up there for like, $3 a box, back in the day. But I always thought that model railroading was just trains running in circles. I had no idea that there was anything bigger to it. In 2019, in December of 2019, my girlfriend said, "Hey, like, can we do a Christmas tree this year?" And she wanted like just a little one that would sit on the table. And I said, "Hey, how about I build a loop of track to run around it? Because everybody needs a train to go around, the tree." So if you look at the very, very first video on my channel, it's actually that little, diorama that I built. But it kind of got out of control very quickly. Like it went from a loop of track on the table to a loop of track on a piece of foam to cutting a river into the foam and making a bridge and then doing the toilet paper water thing that I saw Markland of Sweden do. So then it had a river that was, so it went very quickly from being a loop of track to me finding my creative outlet again.
That tends to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah. And then, when things happened, I was like, oh, I've always loved model railroading. I love the creative outlet. I love, working on stuff. So I had all this free time now. So it kind of turned into this. I don't know.
So then, and anybody else has a question, just, feel free to jump in. But I do have a list of about 12 questions I plan on asking. I don't want to monopolize all of the time. So if anybody has anything, just let me know.
Okay, we got 40 minutes to go.
So then my next question is, what was there any, like maybe one event that really got you interested in the circus train? What's behind the circus train?
That's another one of those things that I'm not really sure. I remember being a kid and I remember going to the circus. I don't remember where it was, or I don't remember any details about it. It always just was sort of this thing of, I liked the idea of this community traveling together to different cities and putting on shows. I'm very into what we would now call extreme sports, essentially, right? So back in the day, you would go to the circus and see people flipping on the trapeze and doing all these sort of things that as a human don't seem possible, people pushing themselves to the limit. So circus for me was always about, a bunch of regular people coming together and putting on these shows that just kind of blow your mind. So I was into theater for a while. I'm a local one, stagehand, in New York City. I love the idea of people coming together to create something bigger than any one person can create themselves. And I think the circus and the circus traveling by train is just a great example of that experience.
Do you have circus equipment in all of the scales that you model now, or primarily one scale?
I have circus stuff in Z scale, N scale, HO scale, S scale, O scale, and G scale.
Wow.
That's impressive.
I have the majority of it, I would say, is an N scale, only because that's who made the majority of it. But I've got, Walthers came out with their circus train set, and I have that, and LGB has a circus train set, so I have that. For a long time, I was trying to stick to just buying circus-related trains, but that's kind of expanded a little bit into other things. Especially once I made the transition from running in circles to operations, I got a very different perspective on model railroading, and that has influenced my purchasing habits as well.
Now, do you prefer N scale over the other scales, or is that just something that, because of circumstances as they are now, is why everything's kind of focused on N scale for you?
N scale was the scale that I chose in 2019 when I was building the loop for the Christmas tree due to space constraints. I grew up primarily with HO scale, but had some N scale. So when I was getting back into it, I already had some N scale track. Like, I didn't need to buy anything. I already had a, locomotive in N scale. And I think when I started looking at, like, how can I build a loop for myself to be able to run trains, the scale that made the most sense in my space constraints was N scale. I could get a loop on a 4x8 table and run a pretty decently long train, whereas, in HO scale, it would just be a couple cars. And I think part of why a lot of people choose N scale is we like running long trains. So that's always kind of been a thing. Like, I've got like 100 N scale circus train cars. It's like one day I'd love to be able to hitch them all up and run them around the layout. But, dreams, future dreams.
Yeah.
So.
I didn't know there were that many N-scale circus cars.
I didn't either.
Microtrains came out with a lot of them, and Lowell Smith has a whole series of them as well. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. Roundhouse came out with some. Concours came out with a bunch. So yeah, Bachman's got some as well. So
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there was that much circus equipment out there and so many scales. That's insane.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of custom stuff too. I mean, I got to go down to Timonium and see the display that the Circus Model Builders puts on, and that's a pretty big group of people that go out and find the blueprints and scratch build, wagons and stuff from small circuses you've never heard of, and it's really incredible.
Yeah. So what is your favorite part of the hobby?
I think there are two parts to that question. I think individually, I like problem solving. I think that the challenges that this hobby presents in so many different areas that all require problem solving is something that's very interesting to me. I like.
Very well put. Yeah.
I like it. I mean, you can probably tell if you've ever watched my YouTube channel. I like encountering problems and then trying to solve them, trying to figure out how to get past whatever that obstacle is, and especially when you're modeling in N scale or in any scale form, you're always making compromises. So that's definitely one aspect of it.
Do you think that have you ever caught yourself maybe trying to self-impose problems, or are all of your problems organic in nature?
They're subconscious.
Are you asking me to give away my secrets of the YouTube channel? Is that what you're?
Well, and I'm trying to think of a way to present the question that that doesn't sound like I'm, being a jerk or anything like that. But, for me, I don't try and deliberately do anything that I know that I can't handle, and I don't think you do either. But sometimes, you could say, hey, I want to do this just for the challenge of doing this versus was it something that I really needed to do? Is that anything that you actually do?
Yeah, so there are a lot of aspects of that. The time saver is a great example of I didn't need to make this remotely operated switching puzzle. I just decided that was this rabbit hole that I wanted to go down. But I will say that the problems that I encounter are real problems that I'm encountering. I'm just leaning into them because I recognize that solving problems is something that's interesting.
Right.
So I'm not fabricating issues, but when issues do come up, I bring them to the channel and bring them to the community. One, so people can see how I'm problem solving them, but also two, so that other people can support me in solving the issues I'm coming up with, because there are many aspects of this layout and everything that I would never have been able to accomplish if it wasn't for the wider community helping and bringing ideas to the table. And in some cases, programming, randomizer, software stuff. So that it's, this is absolutely a community project. And that's, I think, in large part because I try and bring up the problems when they occur. Yeah. Right. I also don't want to, I have a little bit of an issue with people that do like a 20-minute diorama build and they go from start to finish and it's perfect. There's no mistakes. Everything looks amazing. It's like they just have this like talent that is, so far beyond anybody else's that nothing ever goes wrong.
Don't you hate that?
I do.
And let me be clear. You're thinking that, are you kind of calling them out in the way they've edited everything, that they didn't present the same challenges that that they must have encountered in the process?
Exactly. And I think for the wider community and to, we talk about that anybody can be a model railroader, but then you watch these videos of, builds that are just incredibly perfect. And how can we get people into this hobby if everybody thinks that, I can take a locomotive out of the box, repaint it, solder in a DCC decoder, put it on the layout, and it works first try.
All in 20 minutes.
All in 20 minutes, right? So,
not to butt in, but you can say that about any hobby on YouTube. Any woodworking, anything. People think that because this guy has it, does it this way, it needs to be done this way. And if it doesn't get done this way, or I don't have this, then I'm going to fall short and not accomplish what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, there are things that I bought because I saw somebody on their video using it, and I was like, oh, so if I have that, then I can do this other thing. And it's like, no, like they could have done it with, duct tape and gum or whatever, right. Because they've tried it 6,000 times and failed. I've only seen the one time, that they've done it.
Well, that's the nice thing about this group and a lot of, other modelers, is that in the videos that we all do, we kind of talk about what we want to accomplish. We set the stage, we kind of walk through the steps, and the end result often is not exactly like what we said we were aiming for, but it shows the progression to get to an end point. And it's still good work that we do, but it shows it's real because it's not, this is how it's going to be in the end. Voila, it's exactly like I said.
I've got a huge failure out there on my workbench right now that occurred last weekend that I had to walk away and really sit down and oosaw in a way that probably the worst and it's not even that big of a catastrophe, but for me, it was a huge catastrophe. And now a week later, because I kind of, it's both an advantage and a disadvantage because I have to wait a week in between any of my modeling stuff, or at least most of the time I do. Now that a week has occurred and I come back, now I'm prepared to show everyone exactly what happened, why it happened. And this is just one of those things that happens when especially if you're doing it the way I'm doing it, because there's not a lot of people that flip their layout back and forth from top to bottom to do what they're doing like I do. And I had a disaster because of that.
Are you going to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I will, but this show's about Heath, so I want to make sure that we're focusing on
every show is about Heath. I just let other people pretend. No,
yeah, but I mean, I'm filming the whole thing. When that video comes out, there will be plenty of engagement in what happened and why it happened when the video comes out. So my next question for Heath, because we kind of, we talked about what you really liked about the hobby, and you said problem solving. So what is your least favorite thing or the most frustrating thing that you encounter with the hobby?
Certain aspects of, I'm doing it right, you're doing it wrong type of things. I think the whole like NC versus Digitrax, HO scale versus N scale, I think that stuff is just hilarious. And I love poking the bear when it comes to that kind of stuff. Because to me, they're all just tools, tools for your expression of whatever you're trying to create. And I just love when anytime I bring up I had this problem with Digitrax, people are like, oh, well, you should have chosen NCE. You wouldn't have those issues with NCE. And it's just
nobody has problems with NCE.
No, it just works. Apparently it's perfect.
I never had problems with mine.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, so I'm trying to be as agnostic as possible with my modeling, but I do find that I still get into these arguments sometimes about what's better and why, and I take it for what it is. I take it all in fun, but some people get very, very angry about it.
Yeah.
Well, you could say that with anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Closet Branch just said Heath is absolutely right about that. So yeah, I like that.
Do we know who the Closet Branch is?
Yes.
We don't.
I don't remember. He's going to kill me. I don't remember his name, but he's got a really good YouTube channel. He does these silent operating sessions, these so he'll get on a live stream and operate trains and not say anything. And it's this really it's this really interesting experience just to just be watching somebody operate with no extra stuff added in.
Okay.
Oh.
Well,
Yeah.
I kind of wondered because there was something else I saw that he posted that was really over the top fanboy Heath. And I thought, well, maybe that is an alternate personality and it's actually Heath.
Yeah, I believe he's out of the UK.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, but yeah, another one of those model railroaders that I would never know if it wasn't for this community and the worldwide reach that being on YouTube has. So yeah.
So my next question, unless somebody else has got one.
You don't have to say, and my next question is, and then ask a question. I'll know it's a question by the way you ask it, not, yeah, I'm just.
What kind of model railroader are you?
I didn't know there were different kinds.
There absolutely are. And that's why I'm kind of leaving it open-ended to see what his answer is, because we're all a different kind of model railroader.
I lean towards the electronic and wiring part of things, I would say. So I would say I'm more into the systems that make the trains move and make, the lights change colors and how does it connect up to the computer than I am about the scenery and the structures and that part of the hobby.
Which is exactly what I figured.
Yeah.
And I also see you as a collector.
I am 100% a collector as well. Yeah. The transition for me to operations I've always kind of liked the billboard boxcars, like the boxcars with sort of the fancy, old Dutch cleaner or whatever, like the Tyco stuff that came out in the 80s. I've always liked that type of boxcar. So I've always bought some boxcars. But as I get into operations, I find myself getting 4-axle switchers and boxcars and nothing else right now. But the circus stuff is definitely a collection, but the intention is to one day have a layout where I can run it. Like my model railroading story involves the majority of the collection that I have, but I do have things that I just think are fun because they're fun. But
hopefully you'll be able to see it by the time you run it.
I hope so too. Yeah. I hope so too.
Other than your Christmas layout, have you built any other layouts?
Was that a question, Dennis? I'm not sure.
So my next question.
I think this gets into like what is a layout, and that's that's another rabbit hole we can get into. I feel like the first layout I've ever really built is my N-scale switching layout behind me. I feel like everything else was not really a layout. And I guess I would say the reason I'm saying that is that everything else was more just about like running a train in a circle, whereas this one is more about like creating a story and a scene and a world and a
it's just a loop. Everything else was just a loop, and not that anything's wrong with that, but
I mean, as a kid I never got to the scenery part of model railroading. I would lay the track and then go off to college and never get back to it or whatever. So I've never been somebody that's built scenery or structures just because I've never gotten that far.
Steve, has anyone in chat asked any questions we haven't covered yet?
Well, Sparky wants Heath to send his HO circus train up there for him to run.
That'd be fun. I'd love to send, like, I've got some box sets of stuff. Like there's a James E. Straits box set that IHC put out. There's a Bachmann train set that they put out recently. I'd love to see those run.
Cool.
Well,
have
Joe,
you thought about joining a club that would allow you to do that?
So on March 13th of 2020, no. Is that right? Yes.
You're asking us if it was right? I'm going to say it was wrong, Heath.
Probably is. Somewhere in March of 2020, I went to the club in Union, New Jersey. I think it's called the Model Railroad Club. Huge HO scale layout, and they also have a pretty decent sized N scale layout. And I went there. It was about my third visit. And I was going to join when I came back. So I went on a business trip for a week on, I believe, March 13th, came back a week later on March 20th. My boss called me up and said, hey, due to the showstopper, you're laid off. and everything basically shut down. The club stopped having events and stuff. So I'm interested in joining a club. The club was an hour and a half away, one way. And I had to take a subway to a train to another train to, so it was a process.
Yeah.
I've been meeting a couple people locally that have op sessions, and I've been getting more into the op session circle in this area. And for now, I think I'm going to focus on that and not on joining a club. But there are two clubs that are within somewhat of a, I can get to distance that I'm considering joining.
Hey, Heath, Mr. Pick the Vid wants to know, did you ever think your channel and following would ever grow like it did?
I didn't. My original, when I started this channel, it was just to learn about how all the internet stuff worked. And I chose a topic that I was interested in to use as, my topic for the channel. And I really just enjoyed the people I was meeting. And I've always just been, I used to do these Friday morning shows, and they were during the showstopper when I wasn't working and a lot of other people weren't as well. And I just like getting together with people and hanging out and modeling and talking and chatting and, sharing the hobby. So it kind of happened by accident a little bit in the beginning. And now I work on it as a YouTube channel, but in the beginning it just kind of happened by accident.
Well, I'd have to say you're a very well-known name in the hobby, that's for sure.
In certain circles, I would agree that is true. Yeah.
It's always blame Heath.
Yeah. Well, and that was funny too, that's died down a little bit, but when that was in its heyday, I would find a new channel and go on it, and I would just be watching the channel, and somebody in the chat that I had no idea who they were would post up #blame Heath, and I was like, yeah. So that was kind of cool, and that was you asked earlier about whether I, you didn't quite say it this way, but whether I manufacture problems. Blame Heath was an example of something that kind of happened that I then leaned into just because I wanted people to see that it's okay to screw things up, essentially. We're all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, to go with that, screw things up, people screw things up all the time. It's how you recover from them that really counts, right? It really does. I mean, what I do, I screw things up all the time. And it's where you begin to grow and become better at what you do when you fix your screw ups and people can't find them. So don't think your screw ups are like a curse and they're bad. Think of them as a positive.
They're a learning experience.
It's a learning experience. It's another learning experience for your process and whatever you're doing.
Yeah, and I think the idea that should be shared is very important, because you're right. A lot of people don't show their hiccups on their channels. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think more people are doing it now. I do think it's a bigger part of YouTube, and I think that's a little bit just because through the showstopper, YouTube and this community kind of exploded online. But I do think that everywhere people need to share that more and know that it's okay not to be perfect.
Yeah, let people know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you see your railroad 2 years from now?
2 years from now, I don't know if it's going to happen, but 2 years from now, I would love to be in a slightly bigger space. So I want to tell this same story, but I'd like to have, more space between each of the elements that are there. So It's operational right now, but I would love to have a better operations scheme so that more people can come over and operate it. Andy Estep has started this group called the Manhattan Modelers. If you go to manhattanmodelers.com, we're trying to create a way for, New York City, Manhattan area modelers, people that deal with space constraints to to get together and share those sort of issues, but also be able to get together in person. So I'm
sure
hoping
there's a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a lot more than we know about.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to be able to use this space where people can come over and operate and, get to also know people in person.
So now I have a question, Dennis. Hold on. Have you ever thought of going further, getting a space as a group of people and having a club, having something in a larger space?
Yeah, so New York City being very expensive, that's hard to do.
Is it expensive now, like still with all the empty office space?
Well, and that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for that office space thing to really crash is kind of hopefully the goal. But one of the things you'll find in New York, one of the things you find in New York City is that people would rather have office space empty and take the loss on it than have the insurance risks of having people use the space at low or no cost.
That's something I didn't think of.
Because to them, it's a hassle, to have people in their space and have to have the heat on and the air conditioning on and fix the plumbing and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if it's empty, it's much easier on them.
Hey, Bernard's got a good question. How do you haul? I was thinking the same thing. How do you haul all your trains when you don't have a vehicle? That must be a drag on the subway.
Well, and that's part of why I'm not as much of a club person, is because I haven't really figured that out myself. I mean, I went to one N-Track club meeting, the Brooklyn N-Track, and that was a subway to a bus to a half-hour walk, to the middle of the nowhere to meet those guys. And I just, I don't know that I would. I do have, this is a really cool trick. Take a T8 fluorescent protective sleeve, right? So like your T8 fluorescent light bulbs, you can get clear plastic sleeves. In T8 size is perfect for N scale, and I think T12 is pretty good for HO scale. But you take two pieces of balsa wood, like thin little strips of balsa wood, and you run them down the tube approximately spaced like track is spaced. And then you can take your train right off your track, just slide it into your 4-foot tube. And now you've got a 4-foot length of N-scale train in a fluorescent tube. And you can take 8 or 10 of those tubes, stick them in a box, and just carry them to the thing. And then instead of having to take them out one at a time and put them on the layout, you just pull them out of the tube and they just go right onto the track.
Now, did you see someone do that, or is that your own invention?
No, I didn't invent nothing. I stole that.
I've never seen that before. I'd like to see a video on that. That's cool.
They're out there. 100% stole that idea. They show you how to cut the ends of the tube so it fits over the track, so that you can, take a locomotive on the back and just push a whole consist of cars right into it without having to touch them or anything. So yeah, it's out there. Look up how to transport your trains, and you'll find it using fluorescent tubes. So
that's interesting.
There you go. There's some knowledge for you. Instead of getting those A-line cardboard boxes that you have to take things out one at a time, go get yourself some T8 clear, tubes.
Yeah, those boxes are a hassle.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for your live streams, like I know we're using StreamYard right now. You use OBS.
So
Is that correct?
Yeah, I've gone through a lot of different options. I've used StreamYard, I've used Melon, I've looked into a bunch of different things, and I keep coming back to OBS. The way I bring guests up is a guy named Steve Seguin wrote something called Video Ninja, and the way I bring like comments up on screen is using another one of his plugins. But yeah, I use OBS. I like the tinkering. You know, if you don't like tinkering, you know, don't go down the rabbit hole I've gone down. But for me, it works very well.
See, that's what I was curious about, because one of my goals for my channel is eventually to have live stream op sessions, which means I need to have multiple cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And you were going to be one of the people that I was sure going to tap before I went down that route to kind of figure out what complications have you already experienced that you could maybe help someone not make the same mistakes or whatever you want to call them. You know, what have you done that you would never do again concerning equipment and yada, yada, yada for a live stream?
Yeah. And so real quick, because this could be a 5-hour conversation. The mistakes I've made is not understanding how to create the perspectives I want to show, and then getting the right camera to be able to put in the right place to do that. Right. So when you choose to do a live stream, you are choosing the view that people see.
Right.
And if you are showing somebody something, but you are not sort of showing them like, what do they call that in movies when they have the shots that like set the scene and then they zoom in on it or whatever? I forget what that shot's called right now. But the idea being that, like, you know, if you want to give somebody the idea of, okay, like what does the room look like, right? And then we can kind of like, you know, come down a little smaller and kind of like zero in. It gives people a better perspective and an ability to follow the story you're trying to tell. So don't add a second camera unless you need. There you go, Joey's establishing shot. So don't add additional cameras unless they are to help tell the story you're trying to convey.
So what then would be an example of an unnecessary camera then? I mean, because to me it would be kind of I would want my shot to be as narrow as I can get it and still show everything that needs to be shown.
Yeah. So this shot and this shot, both of these are kind of, they're not good. The cameras are terrible. They don't help tell the story. They don't, like, I thought, so in my opinion, this shot right here gives the audience a very good perspective of the layout room. So then through this, like, I can walk over to, let's say I can walk over to the yard and say like, okay, I'm going to do something over here. And then I can switch to that yard camera.
Wow.
And now people know where I am in the room. Whereas what I found was not that one, sorry. What I found is like this camera up here, while I can walk over and kind of, show this, it doesn't really show where the desk is in relationship to everything. So you lose perspective. Do
we need to know where the desk is? I mean, I don't think that's a bad shot. My only thought about that is that because of the blue lights, the track is actually washed out, but you could change that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are ways of changing the lighting, so that you can.
So go back to that same shot. Nope, not that one, the other one.
Which one?
That one's great. The one that you said didn't. No.
Oh, you talking about?
Overhead view.
Yeah,
Talking about this one.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think that's a bad shot.
Yeah,
Now
but
that I can
like
see
you said,
track.
I mean, you can see it's completely washed out.
Yeah, but
You know,
that's
and
a lighting issue, not necessarily a camera angle issue, right?
That's true, but so the secret behind a lot of this, right? Like this is the most expensive camera in the room. This is the second most expensive camera. You know, this is the next most expensive camera. That is a cheap piece of crap camera.
Gotcha.
And you can, and you, in my opinion, you can tell. Like it looks like.
So it's more about the camera than it is the actual camera angle. Is that what you're saying? If you had a better camera there,
I cannot get this. I've tried to get this angle with and sorry, this is bothering me. I have tried to get this angle with one of these cheaper cameras, and they cannot. I can't get this angle.
yeah.
It doesn't. It doesn't work. And so, if anybody's wondering as well, the fact that this is tilted slightly is driving me crazy right now, and I really want to fix it.
Yeah. Well, see, of the two different camera angles between this one and the other one, I would choose the other one for
Oh, really?
my better quality camera. That one, yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's personally, I think that's a better shot.
So the other thing I don't like about this shot is you can't see the yard.
Yeah.
Right. So this shot here, you can see from staging all the way over to the time saver in one shot. So you get the complete perspective of the room.
That's fine for a small area, but it wouldn't work for Dennis, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's
100,000%. If I was
Yeah.
in Dennis's case,
Yeah.
I would need to plan it out for Dennis.
Yeah.
This
Right.
is what works for my situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm telling you just my thought process.
Yeah.
The camera angles, if I had Dennis's, I would probably do something more like what Jason the Train Freak did with the PTZ cameras in the corners.
So that kind of brings me to my next question. Can you recommend a good camera that doesn't break the bank, or is there such thing?
For what use case?
Well, like you said, PTZ. You know, is there a good PTZ out there that isn't going to cost an arm and a leg?
I have tried.
And tilt zoom for those who are not familiar with what PTZ means.
I have tried to use a $100 PTZ camera in my setup and found that it was not worth including in my setup. I would say you probably want to be at minimum in the $700 range to now there's so many factors involved, right? Just for an example, this is 6 $15 cameras, right? So, you know, this is decent for showing the establishing shots, but like if I come over here and there's any movement, you know, it does not show movement very well. Right? So these work great as a static shot, but not as a moving shot. Whereas then this camera is $42 and it does much, much better with the movement, as you can see, but it's also $42, but it's still 2 seconds behind, right? Like if you watch me in this, if you watch me in this view and then watch me in this view, you can see they're off.
Latency.
Right. So there are a lot of factors that go into it. So for me, the $100 PTZ camera wasn't working for me because, I'm thinking about the latency, I'm thinking about the frame rate. Mr. Victovid's mentioning the HC V180K. So this over here is a $250 camcorder. And this is the one I use over my desk that I can, zoom in on things. This one, you need an HDMI capture card. So that adds a little bit more to the cost. So you figure you're up to like $310 or so for something like this. But this is a fantastic option, I think, for like the over-the-desk shots and for, a cheaper camera that gives you really good quality would be something like that. And I have, that's a GoPro 9. So that's a GoPro 9 and this is a GoPro 5. So GoPros are okay. They're not great, but they're okay as well.
Yeah.
So I have a question from Tammy, Mom and Sons. She wants to know, does your theater experience help in the development and design?
That was the next question I was getting ready to ask. Civilian job are we seeing an integration of what your civilian job is and or what she's saying, your theater experience?
100%. Like the whole thing from the story I'm trying to tell, how I light it, like, just the fact that I have these lights on and, at the touch of a button, I can turn those lights off. I can change the colors on them and everything. It's all for me about, how I light it, how I tell the story, the angles that I shoot things at. It is something that I think about a lot. And not just my theater experience, but also my architectural lighting design experience as well has it's all about framing what you want people to look at, right? So if I have people here in person, the lighting on the layout, I want them to be able to, look at what I want them to look at, which is, again, that's why you put that's why you have the fascia on your layout, right? The fascia on your layout, the curtains on your layout, it's all to focus people's eyes on what you want people to look at. So yeah, theater is very, very influential. Yes, taking a still camera and making it mobile is definitely cheaper. I have a $100 gimbal. Ideally, though, never move your camera while you are like live. Whenever possible, don't move your camera. It just makes things better for your audience, in my opinion.
And it makes Dennis sick.
Correct.
Yeah.
Dennis coming up with the pointer was brilliant, in my opinion. I
didn't come up with it. I got that from Rob Bennett's channel.
Okay.
He used I forget which channel it was or which program it was, but he actually used a skewer, and I was like, brilliant. Because at that point, I was still, kind of doing, and I thought, well, that's perfect because you're actually showing what you're discussing in the scene, and it gives everybody an idea of where to look.
To direct people to what you want them to look at without having to move your camera and then move your camera and move your camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to answer Jack's question, I have over here a fast clock. This is the Logic Rail fast clock. It's not set up yet, but yes, this fast clock will automatically do day to night, night to day lighting changes on the layout.
So your lighting changes are integrated with the fast clock?
They will be, yes. The Logic Rail fast clock can send out DCC commands So I will have these send out commands to my lighting controller, and then the lighting controller will set different scenes.
What are you using for a lighting controller?
So for the RGB lighting on the layout, I'm using the DigiKeys DR4050, which is
Well, you're not using something from the industry. I
I'm
forget
not.
what the technology is called.
I'm not, and the reason that I'm not is because I could, through JMRI, link it to a DMX, lighting console. To put DMX lighting in here, I don't have the space. That's really the reality of it. There's nothing.
That's
really...
what I was thinking of going with when I get to my actual Valance that I haven't even discussed on the channel yet. Is I was considering going with DMX and trying to integrate that with LCC and a fast clock. Something in the back of my mind, I just don't know how technical I want to get with all of that, because I don't want to introduce more problems than I can handle.
Yeah, I mean, so the RGB is just it's all LED tape light. So, you can use an Arduino, you can use, whatever, and then just figure out how to get your commands from, JMRI or your LCC controller into it. Or maybe by then, there'll be an LCC lighting controller.
Hey, before we go, JD wants to know, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yeah. A hot dog is a sandwich.
Hot dog is a sandwich. I feel like there's a whole topic of discussion there that we could go another hour on.
Okay. Next week.
Next week. Yeah, we are coming pretty close to the end here. Are there any other questions from the chat that maybe we've missed because we've been yapping the whole time that we could ask Heath?
I will just answer the Closet Branches question. When in the near future, what's my YouTube appearance schedule? I do my live stream Trains and Tech on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock. I try and do it every week. I missed one because I got sick, but I try and do that every Tuesday nights. And then I do the second Sunday of every month for Sidetrack Sunday. So this week, month, that would be March 12th at 8 o'clock as well.
Yeah. Very cool.
Good.
Roy Eltham's got a quick question. When are you going to do a video that is not a clip of your live stream?
So first, I want to edit all my Amherst live streams down into clips. So that's not going to answer. I got to the point where I was so focused on recording things to edit videos that I stopped modeling because I was so caught up in the videotaping of it. So I stopped videotaping my modeling for a little while and just started modeling just to model. So I do need to get back to it. I need to find the format that I want to present for my modeling and get back to edited videos. So yes, I know I need to do it. I agree.
Well, I love your live streams. I think you have a very unique niche within the YouTube model railroad hobby, just because of the way you present your streams. And I think one of the things that can't be overstated about your stream is the interaction you have with your audience. There's a lot of people that can do a live stream, and they might interact with their audience a little bit, but you're kind of really focused on what's going on in the stream, and that engagement is really what I think has made your channel go over the top. And I appreciate that, because that was one of the first things I noticed when wow, he actually saw something that I wrote in chat.
Yeah, and
so I really appreciate that.
Your shows are really fun to watch, Heath.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and it is something I do work. I do work hard at it, and it is something that's important to me. Is to put on a good show, but also not have it be just me doing a presentation. I want people involved as well. So, yeah. And Jack, send me an email. He's saying he can't get into my streams. So send me an email. We'll figure that out.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end, unless anybody's got any final departing statements or questions.
Roy Hardwick, hot dog is not a sandwich.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and we will see you next Saturday. I don't know if we'll have a guest or not, but we'll be here.
Thanks so
See
much for
everybody.
having me.
Thanks
Have a
all,
good
folks.
week. Thanks for coming on.
What great show.
Yeah.